Welcome everyone back to another episode. We have Rose Harper from Tabatchouk Law, and today we are going to talk about estate planning. Thank you, Rose, for jumping on with us.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. And I'm glad that we all coordinated our green, shirts
You
today.
didn't have to call it out, Rose. You didn't have to.
I wouldn't have it any other way. This is
Yeah,
perfect.
that's great. So Jeff and I obviously wanted to have you on because there's a large portion of the population that maybe don't have estate planning set up yet with their family and wanted to talk to you about, why is it important and what are the things that we should look for. But we would like to start off if you can just give an introduction to yourself and how long you've been doing this and all that jazz.
Absolutely. So I grew up in Westchester County, New York. I did not grow up with a family of lawyers. My dad was a police officer, my mom a nurse.
That's a
And
very common, theme
yes,
right there. So,
Irish and Italian. It's like you get more Westchester, New York. And but ultimately I decided to go to law school. I had one aunt who was like a really local attorney. She essentially made no money because she I worked for her one summer and people would call her with all types of questions and she would just say, give me 2 hours and she would research for them for free and then give them the answer for free. She wasn't a good businesswoman, but she was a great resource to the elderly community, and she was doing estate planning. So, really, when I look back, that seed was always planted for me to go into this career path. But, coming out of law school, I went to Seton Hall Law in Newark, New Jersey. And coming out of law school, estate planning didn't come across as, very exciting. I ended up going into litigation defense work. I was doing trial work in Manhattan, working at the big defense firms, defending businesses and corporations. I ended up going in-house for insurance companies. I took 2.5 years off to have my two youngest children. I have three children total. And then I went over to plaintiff side, personal injury, which I really enjoy as well, helping individuals. Because going to law school, I didn't think, you know what, really want to save the insurance companies a few dollars off their policy. It was great for learning, but really to motivate me, helping people when they need it, when their families are most in need, has really motivated me in these recent years going back to work when I have kids. So helping plaintiffs has been wonderful, but putting an estate plan in place for my own family, as I call it like a financial health journey, right? The same way you go on a journey in every aspect of your life. Finances
Mhm.
is another journey that you're on, and that estate plan, putting that in place for your family, is just one step. And after I did that, I realized, wow, this is really, really important for everyone to have in place because everyone deserves to have the dignity of knowing that their wishes are going to be honored.
Mhm.
So that's really all it is. You're putting instructions in place for your loved ones.
Okay.
Very
So,
important.
yeah,
Very
very
important.
important. So, estate planning is based what you just said. It is a blueprint of your wishes if you were to pass away, what were to happen to your assets.
Yeah, well, also yourself. So like,
Okay.
if you were, a lot of people always think it's like, well, what happens if I pass away? But like, what happens if you become incapacitated? Like, who do you want to make your medical decisions and what do you want those decisions to be? There's so much more that goes into it with your powers of
Right.
attorney and really thinking about those questions. And yes, your assets, because you've worked really hard for them. And who do you want to get them and how do you want them to be passed on? Or if you have children, who would you want to raise your children? And also in an emergency, who could get to your kids within 30 minutes and have like that you could give legal authority to be with them in that emergency. So these are all things that need to be taken into consideration when doing your estate plan. But yes, essentially, any estate plan is just instructions for what you want to happen when you cannot make decisions for yourself, either because you're incapacitated or you've passed on.
And from our realm of real estate, it is so critical. And we've all had experiences where that estate planning has not been done.
Hmm.
Yes.
and it becomes a legal mess and things get dragged out. And, and at the end of the day, like you just see things happen and you're just like, I knew this person, or maybe I didn't know the person, but I have an idea who they were. They would not want all this nonsense happening right now.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's the unfortunate thing. Like 60% of adults don't have an estate plan in place. And I think it's a really big misconception that people think
Right.
like, oh, it's only for people who, have $10 million in assets or, I'm not, nothing's going to happen. I have 50 years down the road. Well, I hope that's true for them. I hope
Yeah.
they do have a really long, healthy life. But, unfortunately, like, I'm 39, but I've lived long enough and I've interacted with enough people to know, like, things come up every day. And if you wait, then it's too late. Like,
Hmm.
the
Yeah.
time to get it done is now.
Yep.
Yeah.
Right. What are so if someone doesn't have an estate plan set up, what are some of the pitfalls or things that you see that could have been avoided if the plan was in place?
So
In
one thing
regard,
I
yeah.
see, Mhm. So one thing that I see is as an example, I did a presentation at a community center not too long ago, and it was great because even people who had a plan already in place came. And something I was able to emphasize to them was, I'm so happy you have your plan done already. Um, but I really encourage you, just get a list of all of your assets,
Hmm.
include that with your plan, because you might have a savings account, like a digital savings account, a high yield savings account that you only get email notifications for, nothing gets mailed to your house. Well, that asset could get lost. If your kids
Hmm.
don't know what company to call, who to contact to get a hold of that asset. So unclaimed property is like a really big issue, that people don't think of.
Hmm.
So that's something like when I do my plans, I do a comprehensive plan. So I always give my clients, I call it a financial wealth inventory, but you can do whatever you want to do or whatever you want to call it. But you need to have something in place where your family is going to know, where are your assets held and how can they access them?
Hmm.
That's a good point. And
Yeah.
what would you say, Rose, to the person who, they maybe had wills drawn up 10, 15 years ago and they've had kids since and they haven't addressed it since? Like what would your next steps be in that case?
Yeah, so definitely doing, well, I always do consultations for people just to get a sense. Like when I meet with someone, I like to get to know, first of all, about their family dynamics, about their assets, and then also, their assets, where they're located, how they're titled, and then what their goals are, because everyone's goals are different. I could
Right.
have a couple that, doesn't have any children and is really passionate about a charity and they want to donate everything to a charity and they want to donate it over a few years. They don't want to give it outright. So everyone's goals are so different. And
Right.
that's really enjoyable about this process. Like every single person I talk to like wants something a little bit different, a little bit more unique. So that keeps it fun. But oh, I forget what I was talking about.
So, like, in regards to real estate, if you don't have a will or an estate planning or a trust set up, what are some of the pitfalls if you were to pass away? What would that look like?
So, if you have no plan in place, that means that the state is going to decide what happens. So, the intestacy laws will go into place, and your family is going to have to petition the court and essentially apply to the court and say, I should be the person to administer the estate, and the judge can approve them or not approve them. And then there could be multiple people kind of contesting things within that process as well. So what
Mm.
happens often is once the courts get involved and lawyers get involved in that process, it just inevitably can become contentious, like even if you have the most harmonious family. So it's particularly with people who know that their adult children don't really get along well or something like that, or you don't really get along with your siblings, you know.
Yeah.
So in those situations, you want to make sure you document what you want, because if
Mm,
you don't document it, then your family's gonna have conflict. They're gonna fight over what they think you would have wanted, even if they have good intentions. So it's not
right.
about them trying to get more or get your assets or get your real estate or whatever the case may be. It might just be like they think, oh no, 20 years ago, he said I could get that house, you know? Um, but so you want to make sure you document what you want to happen.
Mm,
Otherwise, that's what really leads to the conflict in the court system. And if you have nothing in place and your family has to go through the court, and I think what people don't realize, yes, at least with a will, you're documenting what you want. So it can avoid some of that conflict. But with the will, you're still going to have to go through the court system. Your family's going to have to do that. And that can take 9 to 12 months. New Jersey claims that their probate process is, amazing, it's easy. But, in my experience with doing probate cases, it still can lead to conflict and be lengthy and expensive. So it's something
yeah. So would you say, so if you had to, when would someone do a will and then when would someone do a trust?
So that really, you remember how I talked about like in that first consultation I do with people, that's really like their first choice in their estate plan design. So the first choice is, do they want a will-based plan or do they want a trust-based plan? And factors that would go into which one they choose. So one of the things that I don't particularly love is, if you go to an attorney and they tell you what they think you should do, or they tell you what you should do, I don't like
Hmm.
that. It's your estate plan. So what I like to do is empower people with information. This will
Hmm.
be the consequences if you choose this plan based upon your specific family dynamics, the way your assets are held, and your goals. Okay. And then that way you can decide, okay,
Hmm.
it's fine. I'm good with the will-based plan, now. Or based upon my goals and what I described with everything else and what you're telling me would be the result, I think I do want to do a trust-based plan now. So those are kind of the factors that you look into, and I give, the potential client all the information, and then they're ultimately the decision maker. But at least I'm empowering them with the information they need to make the decision that will give them the result that they want. Or it might be, well, the result that we want is we want our family to actually avoid court altogether by putting a trust into place, but we're not in a position to invest in that right now. Let's at least get the will-based plan done and come back in a few years to get the trust added on. So sometimes people do that as well.
So, Rose,
Gotcha.
for those that don't understand the difference, can you
Mhm.
explain what a trust actually is?
Yes. So a trust is a written document. It's an agreement. And that agreement basically says that any assets that are covered by or held within that trust agreement
Hmm.
do not have to go through the surrogate's court process. So
Right.
it's very different than a will because those assets are titled into the trust during your lifetime. So the trust owns the documents, the assets, I mean, that you put into title of the trust name now. Um, and there's different types of trusts. So what I'm
Hmm.
describing is a revocable living trust, but some people create irrevocable trusts for
Mhm.
different reasons. Maybe they need to do it for Medicaid planning. Maybe they need to do it for because they have an incredibly large estate and they're doing it for tax reasons. Um, Maybe they're doing it because they need a supplemental needs trust if they have an adult child who is on disability. So there's a couple of different types of trust, but in order to avoid surrogates court, and the most common trust that's used to do that is a revocable living trust.
Hmm.
And it's just a written agreement essentially, but then you have to move your assets into that trust. And by moving it in, I mean retitling it as owned by the trust.
Right. right? We see
Mm,
that in the real estate end of things quite often. You'll see the owner is that, trust. And it comes up fairly often, especially in
mhm.
certain markets.
Yeah. What's so why would anybody want a will if it still has to go through the court?
I guess, well, will was the preferred method in New Jersey because for years it's always been said that the probate process in New Jersey is, easy.
Yeah.
Good.
Until
So
it isn't.
as I've only, I graduated law school in 2013, so estate planning has been around long before me. But I think that just was the way of the practice for a long time, that it was preferred to do wills and then everyone goes through the probate process, and that's just kind of how it was.
Hmm.
And the price point, perhaps, of the trust was for more complicated or extensive estates.
Hmm.
But what we're seeing now is that actually it's way more accessible than people think. And maybe you can save your family a lot of money by getting the trust into place now versus going through the court system later.
Right.
But like I said, if you do have a very small estate or you're really just documenting your wishes, um, or you don't mind, like you, for example, like if someone has, oh, well, all my family lives in California, they don't want to deal with the probate process. I know I need to get a trust to help them out because they don't want to have to deal with, the circuit court in New Jersey. Fine, they need a trust. But maybe everyone lives locally and they have an uncle who's a lawyer and whatever the case may be, they don't mind. They just want a simple will. They can do that as well.
Gotcha. Um, I like efficiency, so I might want to cut out the government in whether or not they can make a decision. Um, but that's interesting. Like, what are some of the like? Do you hear any like nightmare stories or anything like that of like just family situations? Like, I'm sure it can get ugly quick.
So as like estate planning and probate is essentially the Maury show of the
Oh my
legal field. I didn't realize that until I got into it and I was like, oh, this is actually really interesting and compelling. So yeah, I've learned a lot about like family dynamics, and the truth is that everyone has the like not like the same family dynamics, but everyone has something, in their family dynamic that's, you know, some type of issue going on that they need to plan around. And it just is what it is. But that's why it's really important. I can't believe 60% of the adult population is walking around with no estate plan in place. So
God.
definitely recommend at least getting something documented. And I just thought of one other thing that comes up sometimes with people. It's that titling of the assets into the trust, particularly sometimes if someone is like not an entrepreneur or doesn't really like get that concept. They've never opened an LLC. They don't want to have property that's theirs, owned
Hmm.
under another name. That can sometimes become a hiccup for them. So that's why maybe they chose a will-based plan.
Gotcha. How often should every like life event should somebody like say someone buys another property, should that trust or will be updated constantly on every single life event?
Ideally, yeah, because you want it to be accurate as possible. So, any type of major life event, buying or selling real estate, marriage or divorce, having kids, things like that. You'd want to update your estate plan. And you
Gotcha.
can update it with a codicil to a will or amend a trust. It doesn't have mean you have to like restate the entire thing every time.
Hmm.
If you move to another state, then you're going to want to have an attorney in that new state look it over. And you
Mm.
might end up having to get new documents to comply with that state because it's very
Interesting.
specific. Mhm.
Interesting. I would think that if you create a trust, it should override any state because those are the instructions. But I guess I'm wrong.
Well, potentially. And you can put assets located in another state. Like, say, for example, you do a trust in New Jersey and you own
Mhm.
property in another state. You can title that property into your New Jersey trust with New Jersey law, potentially governing. but I say potentially because there are,
Loopholes.
I'm sure, yeah, that can occur, that can cause, local states to get involved. So that's why it's always best to have a local state estate planning attorney, look over
Yeah.
everything.
Gotcha. Um,
Now, Rose, what role does life insurance play when it comes to estate planning? Any suggestions there?
Yes. So, that's one of the things that usually comes up like in my initial consultation when I look at, assets and finances, to just see, is there enough life insurance that could, protect the family? And also I go, you and I talk to people about like automobile insurance, umbrella insurance, homeowners, because, really I'm just looking at like estate planning is kind of protection of your assets, right?
Sure.
So if I'm doing that, I might as well talk about all those other things as well. But with your life insurance policy, because you name your beneficiary. So it will automatically get paid to that beneficiary as long as they're over the age of 18 and alive.
hmm,
So if you've named someone who predeceases you or
Mhm.
passes at the same time in a tragic accident, God forbid, something like that, or if you have a kid and they're under the age of 18, that money can't be given to them directly, right? So, um, in those circumstances, that's why the best thing is for a trust essentially to be named as a beneficiary, because then the terms of the trust dictate who gets the life insurance policy versus that having to go through the surrogate's court.
hmm.
Because yes, it can get paid directly as long as it's
Right.
an adult over the age of 18 who's still alive.
Right.
So,
Interesting.
yeah.
There's a lot of layers.
Yeah. So basically, get all the information that a client has, like between life insurance, all the assets, whether it's, real estate, finance, everything. And then you will get all that information and go, okay, these are your options, and this is where I think would be a good fit and why.
Yeah, I mean, I try my best to just kind of say like these are the options and this will be the result. So if like how I talked about before, like if someone has, people living in another state and no one's living in New Jersey, we talk that through. Okay, like what will that actually be like for them if we do the will-based plan?
Hmm.
Or, if you do the trust-based plan right now, do you really need that, based upon XYZ? Maybe their life insurance policy is secured with, a beneficiary and a second beneficiary. Maybe they already have their bank accounts, direct upon death transfer. So that's what I'm talking about. The way the assets are owned
Yeah.
is important. Maybe their properties are already under an LLC. So it just depends on their unique situation. But yes, definitely talking them through like these are the options based upon what you've said for your family dynamics, your assets, and your goals. This would be the result for your different options.
Gotcha. Interesting. Interesting. Um, Jeff, do you have any more questions?
I do, and I want to bring up the nasty T word, taxes.
Yeah.
Like so what I'm getting out of this is that proper planning will minimize the taxes that my heirs potentially will be facing too. Correct? If I do things the
Potential.
right way.
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely always the goal. Um, and, that's something that can be discussed as well. But it really just depends on, the assets, who would be inheriting, things like that, because New Jersey has a class designation. It's a little complicated, but essentially, like if you're a Class A beneficiary, you don't really have to worry about the taxes as much as opposed to if you're a Class B or C. But that's like a little bit more in depth with the
Yep.
state,
Hmm.
so we can keep it like a little more.
Yeah.
Well, nobody wants to pay taxes. Let's call
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
Give me the plan that doesn't have to go to court and doesn't have to pay taxes. Whatever that one is, I'll take that.
I mean, there'll always be, something, of course, but
Yeah.
and then Usually I tell people like if you have a $10 million estate or more, like that's when you really want to start with the tax planning for New Jersey.
Right.
Yeah. Yep, because they'll always get their piece of the pie for
They
sure.
sure do.
Um, but Rose, thank you so much for jumping on today. Really appreciate it. Thank you for the information, and we'll definitely have you back on again.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. This was great. Love
Very helpful, Rose. We'll put your contact information in the video so everybody can see and contact you. And looking forward to talking to you some more.
Yeah, thank you so much.